Welcome to Chatsu-Nani. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Chatsu-Nani. I'm Satsunami, your friendly local Grinch, and joining me today are my very festive friends Green Shield.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Oh, that's the wrong thing.
God damn it, Green Shield, you had one job. And Adam.
Hello, hello. Festive greetings to one and all. I'm excited to continue my journey into anime.
Yeah, have you been regretting it so far, or do you think it's a worthwhile journey?
No, I think overall been a worthwhile journey. I've not enjoyed every step of it, but on the whole, I have been glad that I've undertaken this quest.
Yes, and there's no better sandwich to do it, so we applaud you. We applaud your bravery.
A shonen's journey
Yes,
indeed.
a shonen sandwich, of course. My God, I would watch that anime. But anyway, my brainstorming / sponsorship ideas aside, today we're actually going to be talking about a very festive anime. Well, anime film, where we're going to be talking about one that takes place really between Christmas and New Year. So we're kind of cheating with this one. We've got all the festive holidays covered in this one. That, of course, is the film Tokyo Godfathers, which was actually recommended by you, Green Shield. And I've got to ask, where did you hear about this film?
I first heard about this movie from a YouTube movie reviewer who I don't watch all the time, but I've watched a few of his things, and he usually talks about live action movies. It's very rare that he'll go into animation and particularly anime. So I was quite curious to hear what he had to say about this movie that I had never heard of. He was reviewing it just retroactively, because the movie itself came out in 2003, but he was having a look at it and he was waxing lyrically about how wonderful this movie is. And I'd watched some of the director's other films and content, so I was aware of the movie because of that. And upon sort of looking for a good holiday anime to watch with you guys, I came across Tokyo Godfathers and I thought, well, this is as good a time as any to finally check it out. This is a first time viewing for me as well as it was for both of you. So yeah, I'm keen to hear what you guys think of it.
And I have to admit, when you and I, and of course Adam as well, we were all talking about trying to find like a festive anime to review, they are really few and far between, aren't they?
Yeah, it might have something to do with the fact that it's not actively celebrated in Japan.
Well, I mean, there's that.
There's not a whole lot of content to work with in that regard,
Yeah.
but yeah, there is a very limited selection. My limited understanding of Christmas in Japan is that it is treated almost like Valentine's Day is here. Like it's almost like a holiday for couples, and so it isn't the same kind of celebration. Funnily enough, they instead of having like a traditional Christmas turkey or ham dinner, they would have KFC.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, KFC became the Christmas dinner to have in Japan.
I mean, they must just be rubbing their hands when Christmas is coming along. In fact, is it not something to do with the mascot looking like Santa or something? Or is that just
It is. There was an advertising campaign from KFC in Japan's KFC franchise, because the Japanese people said that Colonel Sanders looked like Santa. So they would dress up the Colonel Sanders from outside to look like Santa even more so. And then they made a whole deal about like order your KFC Christmas family bucket in advance. And so people would have to make sure they ordered their KFC like well in advance, like you would for a Christmas dinner over here for your turkey. It's quite a novelty, but apparently it's been commonplace for many years now in Japan.
See, Adam, you thought you were coming on here to talk about Tokyo Godfathers, but no, you're coming on here to talk about Japanese Christmas traditions.
I should have known there'd be a massive swerve.
It's not a Chatsu-Nami / Nani episode without a huge tangent, okay?
Without me getting sideswiped.
It's more of a tangent with a podcast attached to the side of it, really.
Really, yeah.
Slap that on the box.
So what you're saying is if this fails, then we should just open like a restaurant or something. That's what Adam and I were discussing in one of the previous episodes, that we're going to be opening a sandwich shop called Bombastic Smorgasbord. We're still working on the details, so don't...
Still getting the fallback plan ready.
Yeah, we're still getting the business details. But putting our business ventures aside, so yeah, we all went away and watched Tokyo Godfathers. So being the resident expert, of course, on anime, Green Shield, what is this film all about?
So Tokyo Godfathers, which is a Satoshi Kon movie, Satoshi Kon being the director of other properties like Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, the show Paranoia Agent, and the film Paprika. He made this movie back in 2003, just in between Millennium Actress and Paprika, and he unfortunately passed away several years ago. The film is set on Christmas Eve initially, where, as we said, it moves along the calendar to about New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, where three homeless people, a teenage girl, Miyuki, a middle-aged man, Jin, or Gin, and a drag queen called Hana, or Hanal, find a lost or abandoned baby and seek to find the baby's parents to return it. The film's loosely based on John Ford's Three Godfathers, which is a 1948 movie which starred John Wayne, and it was a western about three outlaws who end up taking care of a newborn baby after the mother passes away. It was made by Madhouse Production. We've mentioned Madhouse in some previous Chatsu-Nanis before. They're a huge production studio, arguably one of the best anime production studios in Japan. The film was very well received, with both a 91% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes in both the critic and audience scores, so exactly the same. Critic and audience scores received 91%. So it was really, really highly rated both at the time and now. That it's quite amusing. You get to see critic ratings from 2004 as well as from last year on there, because people are still discovering that. The writer of the movie, Kiko Nobumoto, she also wrote for Cowboy Bebop. She actually passed away this past weekend from when we were recording this. It was quite surreal that I think on the day that I watched it, she passed away. So that was very bizarre, and I hope she rests in peace. But it's quite interesting that was the case. Satoshi Kon himself passed away back in 2010 from cancer, aged just 46, so very young. Only directed 4 movies, but is considered one of the greatest Japanese directors of all time, just because of how wonderful his movies are. So I have actually just purchased Millennium Actress. I've never seen it. I want to watch that. I have seen Perfect Blue, and I've seen most of Paranoia Agent, and I need to watch Paprika. So I have a fairly big Satoshi Kon gap that I need to fill, but I would recommend, particularly for you, Adam, that you check out Perfect Blue. I think that'd be a really good one. It inspired the film Black Swan, so I recommend you check that one out.
I'll have to note that down.
See, I was actually surprised because, and I'm kind of jumping the gun a bit here, but in this film, there's like an Easter egg apparently where his like previous work is put into the background as posters. And one of the posters I noticed was the Perfect Blue one.
Really?
Yeah, I was really surprised that Perfect Blue was directed by the same guy who did this film. Like, both completely, by the way, Adam, if you're going into Perfect Blue thinking it's anything like this...
Am I going to get sideswiped again?
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. It's like seeing the new version of Dune, probably, versus seeing David Lynch's version of Dune.
God, you're not selling me on this, damn it.
I wouldn't compare it in that exact way. I think it's a little bit different in that regard, but
yeah,
it's more of a thriller. It's much more psychological than this is. I think there is elements of that you can see in Tokyo Godfathers that are similar to Perfect Blue. I think there's a lot in the likes of Paranoia Agent that are very similar to Tokyo Godfathers. Another wonderful one, that's very bizarre, that one. But yeah, so I don't want to get too much into it just yet, but I think it's a really interesting movie, and I'm excited to hear what you guys think about it.
And yeah, I think that's the perfect moment just to jump right into it. But before we do, we have some final festive messages for the year, so we will be right back in just a second. Welcome to Chatsu-Nani, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Chatsu-Nani, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
So yeah, let's jump into Tokyo Godfathers. We might as well just start at the beginning. This is something, Greenshield, that you brought up in particular about really just the themes of this film. And I have to admit, the themes are layered on thick in this film, aren't they?
Yeah, they're pretty heavy-handed. I mean, the film starts off in a church, and the themes of religion and miracle, and the fact that it's centered around Christmas, so there's kind of a religious, spiritual kind of time anyway, that they would sort of be bringing through God. There is a kind of, not huge, but there is an existing Christian demographic in Japan, which has existed off and on for about 300 years, off for many other reasons. But yeah, there's a very strong Christian religious signs in this and messages. I don't think that Satoshi Kon himself is a practicing Christian, but I think that it's very interesting that he focused this film on that.
It is quite an interesting opening, though, because I think you described it really well when you said it was heavy-handed with the religious imagery at the very beginning. Because does it not focus on a fake baby, mind you, but the literal, baby Jesus at the beginning?
Yeah, which of course the film centers around them finding a baby and looking after a baby. Then it does feel rather on the nose, so to speak. But they're in a church. I think it's like a procession of a reverend talking to a group of homeless people. I think it must be like a food shelter or drive, or can't remember the word I'm looking for there, but just basically like soup drive that they can come and get some food and hear about God.
What I found quite interesting, especially at the beginning, was our three kind of main protagonists' reaction to the kind of religious service. So you have Jin, who's clearly just there for the food. He's there to be fed, and he doesn't seem to care at all about kind of any of the other stuff around that. You then have Hannah, who is also obviously there to be fed as well, but is clearly quite enraptured by the kind of purity and the kind of message around the kind of nativity story. And then you have Miyuki, who doesn't show up at all because, as we find out for later reasons, her kind of not abhorrence is too strong a word, but her distaste and dislike for religion. So I thought it was quite interesting just getting to know our three characters a bit more and kind of seeing a bit more of their own kind of beliefs.
Yeah, it does characterize them very well. It does show, as you said, what type of people we're going to be spending the rest of the film with. It is definitely one of the themes that runs along this film is this kind of theme of desperation as well, because of course they're in a church and in a place of shelter, and then it's almost quite cruel at the end that they are just kind of being cast out, albeit they've got a tent, but it's quite rough going at the beginning, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, because I think what this film is very good at doing is not really sugarcoating, the existence of homeless people. I think it is quite a realistic portrayal of what that lifestyle is like, and rightfully so. I don't think it would be right to kind of schmaltz it up and sugarcoat it and not portray it any other way other than how it is.
I have to admit, one of the interesting things, see, coming from a perspective, and you'll be the same, Green Shield, but coming from a perspective of watching all these anime films set in Tokyo, and unless it's right off the bat, it's a dystopian future film or Tokyo's in ruin or whatever, Tokyo is usually portrayed in a very positive kind of romanticized light.
Yeah, it certainly is romanticized. It's idyllic, and so we're seeing a much more gritty side of Tokyo. We're seeing the mean streets, we're seeing the back alleys. So much of this movie is taking place on these kinds of streets. You don't really get to see the downtown Tokyo main street where people are walking. Very seldom. I think the one scene that I can actually think of where that's the case is where we're introduced to Miyuki, and she spits down onto people that are walking out on that street. And I think that's the only time we get to see a normal pedestrian street, in the downtown Tokyo core. We're seeing that's what they are seeing as being upscale Tokyo, and they're spitting on it, and they're saying we are in different worlds kind of thing. She's high up in the sky, and they're there.
One of the strengths of this film is definitely the framing, and I mean, is it right to use the word cinematography for an anime?
Yes, I think it is.
Because there's one particular scene, really flashing forward here, where it's a scene where one of the characters gets horribly beat up, and they're in this alleyway. And I have to admit, I thought this was really well done, where it's like he's lying there, like all around him, because it's an alleyway, it's like dark, it's dingy, he's surrounded by rubbish and everything, and he sees like this glimmer of light in the distance, where it is the main streets of Tokyo. It is kind of like the reverse of what you would usually see. You know, you would usually see the bright, bustling cityscape, and you would see like everyone going about their day, but there's this kind of like almost this isolated layer that you don't usually get to see, and all of the colours are quite cold and muted. There's a lot of blues in this film, both emotionally and artistically. You were bringing something up as well just before we were recording, Green Shield, about like the imagery of this film as well. I mean, beyond the beginning, you know, with like the snowfall and things like that.
Yeah, there's just a lot to do with, we've already said, the snowfall, the sort of beautiful snowfall falling onto this gritty side of Tokyo, so that it almost sort of hides and masks the more gritty side, and sort of hiding this darker side of Tokyo through this beautiful snow. I'm afraid I don't know. I can't say enough to say what the actual metaphor might be there with regards to our main characters, but I can I can tell that is something that Satoshi Kon is trying to portray. It's going over my head a little bit, but I think I can understand the general message of it.
And speaking of, like, you touched on the characters there, should we talk about our three main protagonists?
Yeah, I think so.
I have to admit, I'm coming from this, like, as someone who, although I thought, like, there was a lot of it I thought was really done well, but I don't know if for me personally, there's a couple of elements that were overhyped, and it didn't kind of resonate with me, especially for the main characters. I'm going to let you guys lead with this first and then give my own opinion, but yeah, Green Shield, I'll let you start first, but like, what did you think of, like, our three main characters?
They were very interesting. I think the initial impression that I got of them was very different from how I saw them both in the middle of the movie and the end of the movie, which is kind of what you would expect from any kind of film, really. Where you'd hope that you're kind of seeing a progression in the characters. I was immediately turned off by Miyuki spitting down on people, but her character grew on me. She was probably the most understated character of the three. She got very little screen time and very little dialogue. I didn't see as much of an arc with her. With regards to Jin, I saw he obviously is this drunk who talks about. We find out later on that, or he says later on, that his wife and daughter died, and he's sort of mourning over that, and we feel a lot of pity for him over that. And then later on, that is ruined by learning that actually, no, his daughter and wife aren't dead. He's just a piece of shit. And we're learning about the baby's parents, and he's seeing similarities in his own life, and with that he is like the father of this baby who is like a deadbeat kind of thing, and he wants to try and not be not that, and he's trying to redeem himself by being a father figure to Mayuki. At one point, Mayuki sees other homeless people, and they refer to her as Jin's princess, and that if they did anything to her, then like he would kill them, kind of thing. So I think that Jin's character is certainly very interesting, and I quite liked his story. I didn't necessarily like him at all times, but I think his story was very, very interesting. I was really pro that. And then Hannah, or Hanel, sometimes it was spelt with an L at the end in the movie, so I wasn't quite sure what the actual name was. She, as I believe that her pronouns are she, seems to want this life as like a suburban housewife, which obviously don't match with her appearance. She's seen as a drag queen, but I think she's more than a drag queen. I think she actively feels that she is a woman and that she wants to have a baby. She sees that this baby arriving into their lives is a sign that she finally gets to be a mother, which she's always wanted but never been able to because of her biologically assigned gender. And so we see kind of a real struggle from her, and then we get to learn a little bit more about her life and her illness. They talk about AIDS amongst the gay community in Japan, which I've never seen an anime or even an animated movie of any kind talk about AIDS. So I thought that was, my eyes went really wide when that was brought up, and so discussion over her partner that she had that died, and the job that she had and lost because she had sort of these anger issues, and she's just incredibly over the top and dramatic, which can sometimes be a bit of a turn off from the character, but is also just wonderful to watch. I thought she was an absolutely fantastic character, and I think Hannah was my favorite character of all.
No matter what you think, they are so expressive, especially with like the animation style as well, which is fantastically done. Really kind of, it's definitely different. And I know I shouldn't be comparing it to his other work, like, you know, Perfect Blue and things like that, where it's a lot more kind of down to earth and realistic, whereas this is a lot more, it's quite cartoony.
Yeah, it's certainly more exaggerated, I would say. There is certain cartoony elements to it. The faces will often be a little more exaggerated. The appearances will often contort. So there's certainly an element to that.
And what did you think, Adam?
I honestly found the three main characters to be both really engaging and really endearing. I really loved all three of our main protagonists. I thought it was so well done how their backstories unfolded throughout the course of the film, and as you've both kind of mentioned, they kind of do start off as quite stock characters, quite one-dimensional, but they develop from that so well that I was just so impressed with how that was done. And what I really loved as well is I loved the relationships the three of them had with each other, and I loved how they kind of formed this like alternate version of this classic family in the way that is it like Jin the husband, Hannah the wife, and then Miyuki like the teenage daughter. And I thought that was just such an interesting like parallel they drew there and everything. I just thought it was a really, really well done. And I just thought they just interacted so well together, and I really believed in these characters, and I really believed that, you know, like for as much like, you know, crazy stuff as they get up to in this film, I really did believe that these could be genuine people. And I would just want to echo, especially what you were saying, Green Shields, about Hannah. I mean, this was 2003, and I don't know at all what the kind of like, let's say, the state of anime was in 2003. I'm going to guess that Hannah was quite a progressive character for that time,
Yes.
just because I don't know enough to say about like trans characters in anime, but it seems like, just judging by what I remember from 2003 and like other kind of media, mainstream media, I don't recall seeing a lot of those characters. So I thought that was very like impressive to have a trans character, like a high profile trans character like that, a really sympathetic one in a leading role in 2003. And yeah, I think she is the standout of the film, and the one that like really like, you know, really her story, it tugs at the heartstrings and everything, maybe the most out of all of them. But like I just loved how they went from these one-dimensional characters into these like really fully fleshed out and developed, and really like, for as much like, you know, as many bad things as they perhaps do in the film and before the events of the film, I just found them very sympathetic characters, and I could completely understand where they were coming from and some of the choices they'd made. As much as you don't maybe condone some of the choices, you're like, decisions, I could totally see why they had done what they'd done. I honestly was just blown away. Like, I just was so like engaged with them, and I absolutely loved them.
I would agree with that, but like honestly, like I do agree with both of your points, and this isn't me like getting comfy on my fence of discussion here, but I did find some issues with the characters. Like, as you brought up, Adam, you know, this was made in 2003, which I actually didn't realise it was that far back. So a character like Hannah she's obviously someone who is, you know, like not gonna be a typical character, but I felt as if there were a lot of like scenes where she was really either the butt of the joke or just like at the receiving end of a lot of like, you know, like I don't know if this was the same for your version, Green Shield, but I remember like looking at the subtitles for this, and I don't know if it's like a true translation of what they were saying to one another, but there's some really like not very nice stuff being thrown at her. And I get it, it's 2003, and you know, like, I'm not saying obviously it's acceptable to use that kind of stuff, but it felt as if like, I mean, like, especially with the, you know, like as you said, with the AIDS conversation that they have, and I have to admit, I was like, oh god, they're actually going into this. And then like immediately after that, it's kind of thrown away for oh no, he just slipped in a bar of soap, and it was like, oh, okay, I get that's kind of the theme they were going with. Or not theme, but like the dark comedy, yeah.
Just to jump in there, it is possible that Hannah was lying or joking when she said about the bar of soap, because there's a lot of scenes where she is coughing blood and is very sick, and so I think that she does have AIDS. I don't know that for sure, and it's never fully explained what her illness is.
Yeah, that's true.
But from what I understand of HIV and AIDS, kind of symptoms she has, collapsing, coughing blood, that kind of stuff, it is certain symptoms that come with having AIDS, and it would explain potentially why she might be homeless, that she might have been cast out because of that. It doesn't go in there. This is me sort of maybe stepping too far to present that, but I think that there is a possibility that that was an intentional kind of like shift to be like, oh no, he slipped on a bar of soap kind of thing, or it may be, as you take it, that yeah, it's just a sort of a silly kind of offhanded joke to like lighten the mood, because the conversation in the bar when Hannah is talking to her, who she calls her mother, but it's another drag queen bartender, it's very serious when they're talking about it. Like the mood, certain, you can definitely tell in the mood of the conversation. I think she might be lying in that situation. I think that there are certain elements where they get all a bit jokey, and there was a scene at the very early on where Jin refers to Hannah as a homeless homo, which I kind of gritted my teeth at.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what you were referencing, that I was like, ooh, that's a bit yikes. But I was watching this with my partner, and she took that as being like, it's almost a slur, but it's almost like between friends kind of thing, that he is very aware of her, and they kind of have back and forths about that kind of thing. So I don't think it was meant in any kind of venom. It's not an okay thing to say, but it's of course dependent between the recipient and the person giving it. So I think there's certain arguments, and I do, as going back to what Adam said, this came across as being incredibly progressive. Like, just to go back again, Adam, you were asking if what the state of like anime was like with regards to transgender characters. They existed, and drag queens and transgender characters existed in anime that I had seen. They were never portrayed like this, though. They were always predatory and dealt with very poorly. From what I'd seen, there may be other examples of much better represented, but generally, if there is a character that is either a drag queen or transgender, they are very poorly represented and often given kind of a predatory element where they like chase boys down kind of thing, and the boys like running away scared kind of thing. That's not the case here. Hannah is much more human. She's much more down to earth. She's much more realistic, and the way Satoshi Konan dealt with it is, I think, far greater than what I've seen in even most live action adaptations of the trans community.
It's a homeless story as well that I don't think gets like recognition or people would even so much think about, because certainly for like Jin and Miyuki, they seem like much more kind of classic homeless characters, if you know what I mean. It is like the kind of middle-aged man who's like down on his luck, you know, and like made a lot of bad decisions that led him to this point, and then it's the teenage runaway. You know, they seem like much more familiar kind of homeless characters, while Hannah seems like something so different that I don't think people would necessarily like associate that character with, like, you know, being homeless. So I think that's also what I really liked. It's like giving you like a whole different insight into this world, you know, and showing you the kind of diversity of people in this community.
That is very interesting you say that, because I don't know from the Japanese perspective. I know in America, Canada, and I think in the UK, there is such a huge amount of LGBTQ people who are left homeless and make up a huge amount of the homeless population in the Western world, because of being outcast by their family or not having enough money to pay for whatever reason, because of they have to keep up with maybe their medication that they require for to essentially to maintain their gender biologically. They need to pay a lot of money, and they can often go bankrupt in that process and often end up homeless. So I think it's quite realistic that we are seeing a trans person who is homeless, because that is something that is hugely common and is not widely represented in media.
See, before we move on, and again, fantastic points, by the way. One thing I want to ask you both, and I just want to make sure I've got this correct, because the only other issue I have with the characters, or sorry, one particular character, Miyuki, who, again, was it you, Green Shield, that was saying that she's probably not like the least interesting compared to the other two?
I think so. I'm not throwing her under the bus as saying she's a terrible character. I think she is still an interesting character. I like her story arc. I like her as a character, but I think compared to Jin's storyline and especially Hannah's storyline, I was the least interested in Mayuki's story.
The only reason I bring that back up is, am I correct in saying that the reason she is homeless is because she stabbed her dad because of a lost cat?
I think he gave up her cat.
I think it goes to a larger issue that and this is one problem I have with the film. I don't think this is explored enough, but I think the issue is that he's a very like overbearing and controlling character, and I think it's that, like, as much as perhaps the flashpoint is like the loss of her cat, I think it's more like the tension that's built up from like his kind of overbearing nature and control of her life, that this like flashpoint moment has led to her like making this rash decision. And again, I wish that was something that was maybe a bit more like, if we'd had a couple more flashback scenes perhaps to like flesh that out a bit, I think it would have make that a bit more obvious. I think would have brought a bit more to her character, but that's certainly what I took from it.
There was a point early on in the movie where Jin is like fighting Mayuki, like play fighting, and Mayuki said, "Even my father didn't hit me." And so I think that that was quite a telling line as to, like, before we really knew much about Miyuki, we learned that from that one line that her father is abusive, but maybe not physically abusive, that he's doing something else to her that has, and just from that line, we were like, that is why she is homeless. We realize you can kind of piece together that she is homeless because of something that has happened in her family life, that her father has been abusive to her in some way. He appears every now and again in the movie, and he seems perfectly normal and perfectly nice, but we aren't really getting a decent idea of what it is that drove her out of the house. And I agree. I think that should have been fleshed out a bit better. I think there should have been something that informed us as to why she was driven to that point. Because yes, the cat was likely the straw that broke the camel's back, but I think there was something else that pushed her to that point.
I do agree. I think that's definitely one of the things that this film kind of, I don't want to say struggles with, because it kind of excels in a lot, but especially with Miyuki's character, where even in her flashback, like, we get scenes that are completely dedicated to, you know, Hannah's character and Gin's character. You know, we get like whole, you know, conversations and arcs to flesh that out. But when it comes to Miyuki's character, like, even her flashbacks interrupted by those other two characters. If you remember, you know, she's like standing with a knife, and it's a very tense like scene, and you think, oh my god, why is this happening? And you know, she's going on about her cat, and I don't want to be reductive and be like, oh, it's all about a cat, but you know, that's almost how it comes across. Because, and obviously there's the lines in between of, you know, you can read deeper as to why, because you think no rational person would go to that kind of extreme, but then it's kind of cut short by inserting Hannah and Jin or Gin into this, and I don't know, I feel as if they could have done that better. They could have like maybe fleshed it out a bit more, as you said.
I think the thing with Miyuki as well is maybe why she appears as the least interesting of the three is that she's quite like, for a lot of the film, she's quite an emotionally dead character, but like that is kind of like, I think that's kind of portrayed as like a survival mechanism in a way to survive like what's happened and, you know, like her choices and turned like new life now, living on the streets and everything. She's kind of had to like emotionally deaden herself and like quote unquote mature in this sort of way to like be able to cope. And so I think that's, but I think that's kind of like why maybe she appears as the least interesting, especially when you pair her with like Hannah, who's a very, very big character, and then Jin as well, who, like, as much as he's emotionally dead as well, he is like quite like an emotional character, and you know, we do get a lot of like his backstory.
I mean, as you said before, like, it is definitely the family dynamic, isn't it? You know, you've got the mother figure, the father figure, the teenager, and, well, the baby, of course, which is the central focus of the film. But, like, speaking of the baby, I've actually got a question for both of you. How did you feel the first time you saw the quote-unquote twist for the ending, like the finale of this film?
I found it, to be honest, it's really shocking. I didn't see it coming, I have to admit. Maybe I should have been like on the lookout for something like this, but I don't know. I found it really like a gut punch. To be honest, I found the whole ending like really, really tense and like honestly on the edge of my seat, heart in my mouth and everything. And I honestly thought that they were going to pull a really like depressing ending out. I was not prepared for that at all, but like that's not the way it went down. But yeah, I found that ending like to be a real shock. Not like saying in a good way, like obviously it's a horrible thing that, you know, what this character's done, but like it really like drew me in even more and really like felt the tension of the ending.
No, I would totally agree with that. I did not expect it either. Like, I felt there was something a bit off. Not so much like, I was really annoyed when I saw Hannah slapping the mother.
Oh, that slap! That I made a note about how wonderful that slap was. It was just the biggest slap you ever did see.
Oh yeah, it was like the biggest slap of Tokyo 2003. Just yeah, just that echo. Yeah, like I was honestly quite peeved at that. I was like, come on, this is a desperate woman. You know, she was about to throw herself off a bridge, blah blah blah, and then it cuts back to Gin's story, and he's talking to the woman's husband, and is saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, my wife stole a baby," and you're like, oh, okay, oh no.
Yeah, it's a real like thank goodness moment that thank God Jin went to see the trash bag, dirtbag husband to find out that was the case, and that he like steals a bike and like pelts down to find the mother. I hadn't picked up what was going on. I must have missed that dialogue. I thought he just thought that the mother was trying to kill herself, and so he had to go save her. I then learned that no, he was trying to like get the baby back because he knew that the baby was stolen by this woman who we learn had a stillbirth, and so to replace the stillborn baby, she stole a healthier looking baby.
I think it gets to like another one of the central themes of this film, which is like an exploration of love, and like we see love in all its forms. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, you know. In this case with this woman, I'm sorry, is it her name's completely escaped me. I won't butcher it, but like her love for her, like, you know, stillborn baby expresses itself in this like horrific act, you know, of a desperate woman, you know. But on the other hand, we have like the kind of unconventional love between like Jin, Hana, and Miyuki as this sort of like alternative family unit. So yeah, like just that kind of exploration of love felt like a really central theme of this film, just seeing like it all these different forms.
One thing I'm going to bring up, and apologies for acting like the devil's advocate for this episode. Usually it's somebody else, but no, it's going to be me this time.
Don't lie, you're always the devil's advocate.
I know, I'm trying to absolve myself. One of the things I'm going to bring up that I think this film maybe has another slight issue with, and again, like when I'm bringing up these issues, I just want to like reiterate and point out, I'm not like saying, oh, this is a terrible film because of it, because as we've obviously like discussed, it does explore a lot of these themes really well, but I feel as if the tonal pacing of this film can sometimes be all over the place. Like you'll have a scene that's quite serious, like for example when Gin gets beat up in like a very, you know, horrific scene of just these privileged teenagers who, you know, they just don't care, they're just saying, oh, we're cleaning up the streets, and they beat the hell out of him. And then followed by like a scene where Hannah's like distraught about it, and then it's like, oh no, it's just another dead man, you know, throws the sheet back over him, and you're like, oh god. And you know, like I get like it's, you know, again, it's a dark comedy at times, but you know, it's like, I'm not saying that it's consistently through the film, there just are some moments where it is like a kind of like you're watching it and you go, holy shit, that was dark, and then it's followed up by a joke, and you're kind of like, oh no. I don't know, sometimes it undercuts. Like, what do you guys think?
I actually think that, in my opinion, the film perfectly walks the line between, on the one hand, being harrowing, and on the other hand, being actually quite funny and heartwarming. And like, I completely see what you're saying. On the surface, I think this really hard juxtaposition between, like, you know, these comedic and kind of like saccharine moments, and these like really like brutal and harrowing like scenes on the other hand. But I don't know, for me, I just found it walked this line absolutely perfectly, you know. And I didn't find as much as the two things seem to be like at odds with each other, like, I don't know, it just worked for me. I just thought it was like a perfect blend, and that like it just balanced these two elements perfectly in this way of being like a kind of like a true authentic, you know, story of this kind of gritty and like horrific existence for these three characters, but also being this tale of like kind of redemption and hope, and this heartwarming story, you know, about three human characters. So I can only speak for me perfectly, because I completely see what you're saying about like the tonal mismatching, but for me it worked, I have to say.
I agree more so with Adam than I do with Satsu. Quite funny, this should be brought up because when I was doing some sort of research for the movie, and I sort of looked on the Rotten Tomatoes to get an understanding of what the critical reception was, there was one review that really stood out to me that I think perfectly summarized my view of it, and it's really short, and it said, this film is slapstick with heart. There's a huge element of slapstick comedy throughout this movie, but really kind of feeding through is just this heart to the movie, that there's a real kind of emotion, that there's a real kind of sympathy for these characters. I think, like as Adam has said, it walks the line between the world of wackiness and seriousness very well. I think that they are able to make scenes that would otherwise be like concerning a little bit more uplifting, a little bit more like they reduce that kind of concern. You don't always have to let it sit in darkness, that you can bring a bit of levity, a bit more lightness to the situation, like the scene where the old man that Jin was with was beaten at the same time Jin was, and he died. He was on like a gurney, and Hannah and Miyuki were concerned that it was Jin, and they like rushed over, but like it was almost played for laughs. This person who had just died, and I like you understand that there it was emotional before, but you're able to sort of separate yourself from that and be like, no, I understand the comedic element of this situation. One of the great comedy bits of the movie is Hannah and the taxi driver. This whole kind of recurring bit where Hannah continuously finds the same taxi driver to take her around. And she starts at one point. They're chasing towards the end of the movie. They're chasing the mother who's still stolen this baby, and she stops a car, and it just so happens to be that taxi driver. And just the look on the taxi driver's face of, oh God, not her again, is just so wonderful. And I burst out laughing when I was watching it the other night. So I think there's a real art to how they managed to toe that line, and they work the serious with the slapstick. So I applaud it. I understand why you might feel that way, Satsu, but I respectfully disagree.
Where's the button to stop the episode? No, I'm okay. No, I totally get you guys as well. I was saying this to Adam as well before we came on, but I feel as if personally there was a lot in this film that, although I did like it and I do think it does something really well, there was other bits I was kind of like, I don't know. And this is going to sound really weird, but the remedy, I suppose, that's probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean. I thought that this definitely is one of those films that maybe would benefit, like, see if you don't like it the first time, it would definitely benefit from a rewatch. And this isn't something I usually say about films. Like, if a film's bad, you'll say, oh no, or you don't like it, you'll say, oh no, I'm never watching that again. With Tokyo Godfathers, it seems as if there is like a lot more underneath, because obviously in your first viewing you're concentrating on the kind of the plot unfolding and your initial reactions. And I mean, personally for me, I am one of those people that unless a film like blows me away, the first time I see it, it sits with me a lot, and I'm kind of like, it's it's like, it's a film, thinking, is it as great as everyone's saying on first viewing? Although it did some amazing things, I don't know if it's just because of the hype. I'm kind of like, did it live to the hype? And it's me kind of trying to compare it to other people's views. But I do think this definitely would benefit for people who haven't enjoyed it in the first viewing. It is one of those films that maybe would benefit going back and rewatching it. I wouldn't say right away, because I was saying that to you, Adam, like, not right away.
Yeah.
Next Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Put it on the list next to Muppets Christmas Carol, Jingle All the Way, It's a Wonderful Life, and all the classics. Die Hard as well, yep.
Put it on the rotation.
See, on a slight tangent before we finish up, have you started watching Christmas films?
We watched The Grinch the other day, but no, we keep delaying it. We're going to go see the new Spider-Man movie, so we've been watching Spider-Man movies.
There's Red, in fairness.
I mean, just like Santa, web swinging into your chimney,
Your friendly neighborhood Santa.
I'm sure that's like a European tradition, Spider Santa or something. If you've been naughty, he just climbs down your chimney.
Can I raise a final, potentially controversial point, especially for you, Satsu?
Do tell.
Just to end.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I kind of think Tokyo Godfathers is very similar to another Christmas favorite, which I know you hold very dear, Satsu. I don't know if you like it or if you've seen it at all, Green Shields, but I think Tokyo Godfathers is a lot like It's a Wonderful Life in the way that both these films feel like they're designed for us kind of cynical adults who have like lost our kind of belief in the magic of life. Like we've been around the block now and we've lost that innocence and kind of magic that you have as a child. We're kind of just like, oh, the world is the way it is now, and we get quite cynical. And both these films feel like kind of like messages to be like, but look for the magic that you can find every day, however small it is. So I kind of saw a parallel there. I don't know whether that is controversial, whether you two will agree or not, but that's kind of how I felt having just watched Tokyo Godfathers.
I'm just thinking, it's funny you should mention that, because I was thinking back to a scene at the very beginning of the film, right after the service, where they're all looking through the garbage and again saying like, oh, I can't find these books I was going to give you for Christmas and everything. And Miyuki is like, oh, why are you bothering with, these books, and getting quite frustrated and angry. Again, that's kind of like a good nod to his character being like or trying to be like a parental figure.
Definitely.
And on the one hand, he's looking at that side of trying to preserve this, even if albeit if it's even small, he's still trying to pass on this tradition of, even though it's Christmas, like no matter how big or small the gift, you're still getting a gift. And whereas Hannah, she kind of fills that role of, in the religious religious aspect of like following along with the nativity story at the beginning and then drawing parallels with the baby who, you know, she calls like constantly throughout the film a miracle because everything that happens seems to like, there seems to be like a bubble around them whenever they have the baby.
So there's some divine intervention, or this the most serious case of plot armor you ever did see on this baby. The baby's protected by gusts of wind, and they're in a graveyard at one point, and the baby's very hungry and needs changing, and they managed to stumble across a child's grave where someone had left like baby supplies on the child's grave.
Yeah, I found that a bit grim. I'm going to be
Oh,
honest.
it's incredibly grim, but they were like, well, this is this score. We managed to get baby supplies in this, from the situation, so it was quite amusing in that way. It was very dark humor.
But no, you raise a good point though, Adam. I know I'm biased. Like that's a wonderful life because you know better than anyone like how much I well, revere's the wrong word.
Well, I think revere is the perfect word for it. It's
Yeah.
classic.
I've got my James Stewart shrine up for the year, you know, just nestled in the corner. He's got a lasso around him, and you know.
Atta boy, Satsu.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, though, Adam. It's a really good point. Going like as you said, like speaking of final points, Green Shield. Is there any like final points you would like to bring up about this film?
It's funny you should say that. I don't have any necessary like final arguments to be made. There were certainly some very interesting scenes. Those scenes that I felt weren't very well explored or explained. The whole Latino side plot with the assassin.
Yeah.
I wasn't really clear on what was happening there. Maybe I just missed an explanation, but there was a scene where someone of a different skin color attempts to assassinate a character that had helped them that we think is presumably a mob boss. And they speak in what I later figured out was Spanish. And so there are no subtitles appearing because the characters don't know what they're saying. I don't think their motives were ever fully explained. Maybe they were and I missed it. Did you guys see why they were doing that?
It felt like a reason to artificially separate Miyuki from Jin and Hannah, if I'm being honest, and also like let the baby have like some milk. To be honest, it kind of felt like I felt like the Latin thing. I was like, I kind of forgot about it. It was only after I finished the film I was like, oh yeah, that was a whole bit near the beginning.
It was a bit confusing. I wonder if it's also just trying to highlight a minority group in Japan and sort of the conditions that they live in.
That's fair.
To sort of look at a different side of the gritty world of Tokyo, that like you can see like a needle on the ground, so it's like a drug den that Miyuki has been taken to. But then we're introduced to this very lovely Spanish-speaking woman who I initially assumed that these people were Filipino because Philippines is a largely Spanish-speaking community that is near-ish to Japan. But the description said Latino, and I don't know that Filipino people would be described as Latino. I don't think that is accurate because they're not in Latin America.
I wonder if it's like an anglicized, like for like a Western description.
It's possible.
Perhaps saying Latin American is like more like Western people would know that more than perhaps if you said Filipino. That's just a guess.
It's possible. I feel like there's such a strong Filipino population even in America that
That's so fair.
You would say Filipino. There may be a larger Latin American population in Japan than I realized, but it seems unlikely. So I'm happy to be corrected if someone knows better, but I'd assumed Filipino, but it seems to be Latin American. That plot was a little bit random. As I say, it may just be to try and highlight a foreign community that lives in Japan and some of the conditions they're exposed to. But the whole language barrier is something you don't see very often in anime movies. You don't often get to see a character who's not from Japan speaking a language that's not Japanese and seeing the character try and like understand each other. Quite often you'll watch an anime and these like NBA basketball players be like, oh, of course I speak Japanese. Japan is the greatest country. Of course I learned Japanese. And so like everyone speaks Japanese. Like even we watched Death Note and like the Americans come over and of course the Americans speak Japanese.
Bunch of weeps.
Yeah, they'd watch a lot of Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho when they in their academy days. Yeah, so like that, there's an element again of realism there where we're presented with a foreign group who don't speak Japanese, and so there's a language barrier there, and that's interesting. But yeah, other than maybe that, which again, even that we've kind of summed up as there maybe being a reason and a positive behind it. I think this is a wonderful movie. We joked about putting it into the Christmas rotation. I would genuinely be keen to add it to my Christmas rotation. I think it's quite healthy to swap one in, one out kind of thing. Well, you've seen one movie every year for the past 20 odd years, you then want to add something new to the rotation. And I think I would be keen to watch this again, maybe next year.
Would you say the same, Adam? Would you put it into the rotation?
Oh, I absolutely love this movie. I love the characters. I love the story. It made me laugh. It made me cry. I just adored this film. And I can see this definitely being one that goes. I watched this with my fiance, and she was absolutely raptured with it as well. So I think this is one that will probably go into our Christmas rotation in the future. I just full marks this film. I just loved it.
And I don't want to end this episode on a down, but
Then don't.
Thank you for listening to Chatsu-Nani. I wouldn't say for me personally it's there yet. I'm not. It honestly sounds as if it's like a sacred pedestal. It's like, like the bouncer.
Oh, the Christmas
It's a Wonderful Life. Come in. Muppets Christmas Carol, come in. Tokyo Godfathers. Nah. Try next year. Go on the maybe pile. Next to all the Christmas specials on TV. Nah, jokes aside, I think that I would definitely have to watch this film again to appreciate it more. The first time I watched it, I didn't 100% get the hype. I think it, as we've been saying for the last hour, it does a lot of things really well, and I think it's definitely worth being praised for that. But yeah, ask me again in a year. Yeah, maybe my answer will be different. Maybe it will be on the rotation the next time I watch it.
Well, if you keep saying, "Oh, I'll try it again in a year and see," that means it's on your rotation.
The old switcheroo.
It's not on there.
Well, no, I'm going to Uno reverse you on this, Green Shield. You know what I'm like watching films. I take forever.
I will send you a Blu-ray of Tokyo Godfathers and just physically insert it into your Xbox.
I just want to reiterate and repeat this story that I've probably brought up in past episodes, but Green Shield has told me about certain films, suggested certain films, and when I've said, oh no, I'll watch it, actually went out 1 year for my birthday, got me the DVD of said film, and we watched it that night, didn't we? That, of course, being The Shawshank Redemption, just in case anybody's curious. So yes, I have seen The Shawshank Redemption. I still haven't seen The Godfather, so it's on the list, okay? I've seen Tokyo Godfathers, though.
It's pretty much the same thing.
You're halfway there.
There's a mafia aspect to it.
I mean, there's literally a Yakuza plot in the middle. So yeah, close enough. And yeah, seeing that festive note, thank you both so much for watching and discussing this film. For me anyway, it's not a film that I expected, but even despite what I said there, I still enjoyed it for what it was. And yeah, on that note, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.